Okay, testing. Okay, I'm just gonna begin. Today I want to talk a little bit about Ilhan Omar's resurrected tweet about the Black Hawk Down operation. For those of you who don't know, this happened when she was a Minnesota state legislator. There was a comment regarding the Black Hawk Down operation, which was a rescue mission in Somalia to recover the bodies of two pilots that had been sent there as part of a larger mission to capture a Somali warlord, Mohammed Farah Aidid, who had begun to seize UN food shipments. So the U.S. initiated something called Operation Restore Hope. And basically, this started out as a humanitarian operation under President Bush, George H.W. Bush, and it morphed into a ill-defined military endeavor under President Clinton, who gave the armed forces a directive to capture the warlord and his subordinates. And this is basically the plot line. If you've ever watched Black Hawk Down, or if you've read the book written by Mark Bowden, which I highly recommend, it's basically the plot of that book, following what happened to these men as they tried to initiate a mission to capture this warlord. And it turned into a trap where basically the Rangers were surrounded and ambushed by more or less a third of the city of Mogadishu. So thousands and thousands of Somalis were armed and trying to murder and capture and or murder the Rangers who were sent there as part of a little bit over 100 or 150 of them were sent there as part of this mission. So it was a military mission a humanitarian mission, which morphed into a military mission gone awry. And it wound up in the shooting down of two Black Hawk helicopters. There's also evidence that Al-Qaeda was involved in marshaling some of these troops, although a lot of the people attacking and shooting them were children and women, not innocent women and children. Basically, they were some of them were used as human shields, but others were actually attacking the American forces. Now, this is a very long-winded way of just introducing the topic and explaining the context of Ilhan Omar's tweet, where she said thousands of Somalis were killed. It wasn't thousands. It was somewhere between 500 and 1,000. And the mission itself was remarkable in the sense that even though it went awry, and what should have been a very simple apprehension mission turned into a firefight for over a day in one of the most crowded, densely packed cities in that part of Africa. It still was remarkable in the sense of how courageous and very skilled the Rangers were. They were able to defend themselves until aerial support came in the sense of gunships to rescue them. They were able to defend themselves in this against almost impossible odds several several dozen American troops facing basically a third or a quarter of the city of Mogadishu, armed to the teeth. And even though there were 19 men that lost their lives and numerous casualties, almost all of the people that participated in it incurred some sort of injury. Even the ones that the ones that survived. Even so, it was still a remarkable demonstration of valor, despite the fact that the mission itself was ill-conceived. We should have never, and in this sense, I agree with some people who say that we shouldn't have been in Somalia. But the point is, the troops there were not there to kill Somalis. If there were no Somalis attacking them, they just would have recovered the body of their fallen brother and been on their way. The whole idea was to prevent starvation originally, and it was transformed into this military mission without the input of the troops. They were just following their guidelines, the guidelines that they were given. But even so, it was still a remarkable mission in the sense of them holding off a third of the city, trying to kill them, and militias, just wave after wave of Somali militias trying to annihilate them. They were there to help the Somali people. Now, the mission itself may have been ill-advised, and I do think trying to, even missions with ostensibly noble intentions, like to stop a famine or to prevent militias or warlords from ruling the city, even though these might have noble intentions, I still think using American military power and sacrificing our blood and treasure to remedy those wrongs is a misguided idea. Even so, the point is they weren't there to kill Somalis. That was the complete opposite of what they were there to do. And one of the men that survived this mission and participated in it was on Tucker Carlson's show, trying to explain this to his national audience, and also explain how there are soldiers who still deal with trauma and injuries incurred in battles that they didn't choose, and that might you might necessarily have supported, but still they have to address these problems once they get home from the battlefield. Now, Ilhan Omar accusation that they killed thousands. First of all, it wasn't thousands. It was between 500 and 1,000 maximum Somalis, and the people they killed were all attacking them. They didn't kill any Somali civilians. Every single person that was killed was either a militiaman or and they show this in the film. Unfortunately, like sometimes children were forced or to attack, but there was no one that was just minding their own business that was killed. So that's wrong. But I think a bigger issue is you have this woman who views America as the enemy. It's not just that she looks at certain American military interventions as misguided, which I think a lot of Americans would share that opinion. But the idea that she views the American armed forces and Americans in general as the enemy, it's not just soldiers. She hates Americans, even people who don't take up arms in defense of their country or enlist in the armed forces. She still views them as the enemy. This in spite of the fact that she was rescued from a Kenyan refugee camp. So first of all, she doesn't have any idea what happened in the Battle of Mogadishu. Look, she wasn't there. She was in a Kenyan refugee camp. But secondly, we rescued her from a life of misery. And I think this is one of the problems with our immigration system, is we take people who are not going to be ungrateful. And to a certain degree, this is an innate human nature problem. I don't think any of us is innately grateful when someone helps us or gives us a gift. We're resentful of them, but especially when you're talking about um, Muslims, people who follow Islam, they view charity or being nice as some sort of weakness that they can exploit. And Ilhan Omar is a perfect example. If it weren't for the U.S., she would have lived the rest of her life, at best, assuming she didn't die of a disease or wasn't murdered, somewhere in the Cape, in Africa, in this little triangle in Africa, in Somalia and um, Ethiopia and Eritrea, assuming she wasn't killed somewhere in there or died in a refugee camp. The best she could have ever hoped for was just to live her life as an outcast, and maybe live a normal life expectancy, but just have a miserable life and die as a Muslim. That's probably the best she could have hoped for. And instead, the United States, rescued her for no benefit, because we're not deriving any benefit from having Ilhan Omar or her family live here. In fact, we've reaped just hatred and enmity and having to deal with someone who despises the U.S. and is now sitting on the House Foreign Relations Committee. So we haven't derived any sort of benefit from her. She's the one who's reaped all of the benefit, and she shown no gratitude. And people need to understand this, because there's an entire community in Minneapolis called Little Mogadishu, where the vast majority, and I'm not saying every single Somali that comes to the U.S. feels this way, but like the vast majority have the same attitude. Maybe they're not as vocal as Ilhan Omar. They don't have the same megaphone, but they feel the same way. And I think Americans need to wake up and understand this when they think about our immigration policy. This is a woman who views Al Qaeda and Mohammed Farah Adid's forces, the militias there who were trying to kill Americans. She views them as allies, and the people they were trying to kill, i.e. American citizens who were serving their country, as enemies. And I think people just need to mull that over when the media or someone tries to pull at our heartstrings and say we need to accept more refugees. They just need to take a minute and think about that.